My name is Mackinza. I used to be a salesman, the kind who wore a tie, spoke in memorized buzzwords, and plastered on an unnervingly wide smile. My life was spent under the harsh fluorescent lights of a cubicle, pushing products no one genuinely needed onto people who didn't want them. Back then, my biggest concerns were hitting arbitrary quarterly targets and whether the break room's perpetually broken coffee machine was operational. That world is nothing more than a memory now. It's dead and gone, buried beneath a catastrophic heap of shattered glass, concrete rubble, and rust. I don't sell anything anymore these days. I get paid to retrieve what civilization left behind. I'm what people call a scavenger, though they prefer to use fancier, less apocalyptic terms like retriever or contractor. It's a cheap way for them to pretend that a semblance of order still exists, that they're hiring a professional instead of sending a man into the chaotic heart of a dead world infested by the infected. The work is simple, despite the constant danger. If you need something, be it a can of food, functional tools, medical supplies, or batteries, you come to me. I go out, secure the item, and bring it back. My continued existence depends on avoiding getting shot, crushed by a collapsing structure, or being torn apart by whatever horrors are now lurking in the shadows. There is absolutely no room for negotiation in my line of work. You state your need. I state my price, which is based strictly on the inherent risk and distance of the job. If the cost is too high for you, feel free to venture out and try to find it yourself. Good luck with that. Most survivors nestled safely behind their walls. Whether those walls are literal barricades or simply a willful ignorance, fail to comprehend the sheer rot that exists beyond their small safe zones. Out there, past the burned-out suburban blocks and the highways that have half sunk into the earth, it's just a wasteland of bones, rust, and an overwhelming, oppressive silence. A silence so profound, it feels like a physical pressure against your eardrums. I've trekked through cavernous shopping malls with roofs completely caved in and escalators choked with thick, wild vines. I once found a vending machine full of mummified rats. Kicking open the doors of a pharmacy almost always leads to the same sight: bare shelves, stripped clean years ago by panicked looters or worse. However, not all memories of the past are gruesome. In an office tower, I found a small room on the 5th floor containing a single mattress with sheets, a neatly folded blanket, and nubs of candles melted down in glass jars on the windowsill. The room looked pristine, as if the occupant had just stepped out. The unsettling normalcy of that untouched space disturbed me so much I couldn't sleep for 2 nights. This job forces you to be meticulous, and it hardens you emotionally. Where I used to be garrulous, now I only say what is absolutely necessary. I currently live outside of what remains of the town of Ridge Run. It's a small cluster of surviving buildings where people trade scraps and cling to what's left. I steer clear of local politics, the constant, Petty arguments over which pile of junk belongs to whom are pointless. My shack is located a short distance away, secluded enough to deter uninvited visitors. It's a minimal setup, a corrugated tin roof, a wood stove, one single chair, and most importantly, my partner, my dog, Barry. I found Barry about 5 years ago, during the chaos when the cities were finally falling dark. I was desperate, following a long-shot tip about an old co-op farm, hoping to find sealed bins of grain. The location looked like a defunct winery, with endless fields of dried grapevines. The rumor mentioned still upright solar panels, which hinted at intact batteries and possibly refrigeration. I was still naive enough back then to think about setting up a long-term, sustainable life. A foolish idea in retrospect. The farm was nearly totaled. One barn was reduced to ash, and the main house was gutted. I assumed it had been picked clean, but experience teaches you to always check for the overlooked. I heard a faint, strange sound while checking the area behind the farmhouse greenhouse. It was a subtle, wet, sticky noise, followed by a soft, pained whine. My first thought was an injured animal, a coyote or raccoon. Normally, I would avoid a situation like that, but since I was already planning to shelter in the cellar for the night, I cautiously investigated. Near the foundation of the back wall, I found a hole, either a tunnel or just heavily eroded concrete. Inside, half buried in a dark, pulpy mess, was a tiny puppy. He was completely coated in a dark red and purple juice, eyes barely open, twitching and whimpering. Initially, I feared it was blood, but I realized he had fallen into a fermenting pile of old berries, mulberries, grapes, plums, a sour, sticky mess. The starving thing must have crawled into the old fruit batch. He was an absolute wreck and smelled horribly of sour wine and wet dog. I pulled him out, wiped him as best I could with my sleeve, and wrapped him tightly in a piece of tarp. He didn't struggle. He just lay there shivering. I wasn't at all confident he would survive the night. I fed him some dry jerky and let him curl up inside my pack. He was still breathing when morning came. He didn't cry or complain, just stared at me with an intelligent, expectant look, as if waiting to see if I would discard him. I kept him. There was no practical reason for it. Maybe I was simply tired of the crushing solitude. Or perhaps I just couldn't bear to leave behind something that desperately needed help. I named him Barry. He isn't merely a pet. He is an invaluable partner. He's smart, incredibly alert, and remarkably quiet. He learns faster than most people. He never barks unless there's an actual threat. Barry possesses an uncanny ability to sniff out decaying matter, track a faint trail, and spot minute movement in tall grass. I've witnessed him freeze completely, motionless, at the slightest scent of danger. A reaction that has undoubtedly saved my life on multiple occasions. We operate as a cohesive unit, I focus on clearing rooms, checking for tripwires and traps, and opening storage containers. Barry watches my blind spots. When entering a dangerous, collapsed structure, I often send him ahead. He's small and nimble enough to squeeze through broken doorways or foundation holes. If he lets out a low growl, I abort immediately. If he returns to me silently, it's generally safe. We share our limited food supply, and when on long runs, the modern world is irreparably damaged. Cities are either underwater or burned out husks. Towns like Ridge Run are just small, tense clusters of survivors scrambling to make do with the bare minimum. Some regions are ruled by petty warlords, others by unsettling cults. Many just shoot anyone who approaches their territory. There's no effective central government, no global communication. If you need something retrieved from a distance, you need a scavenger, like me. People hire me for varied requests. Sometimes it's for salvaged tools or vehicle components. Occasionally, they're looking for a missing person. More frequently, they need crucial medication, packets of seeds, or a working radio. My fee is calculated based purely on risk and distance. I refuse jobs that are too reckless, completely vague, or simply suicidal. But if the objective is feasible and the compensation is fair, I'll take the contract. My roots have taken me through toxic chemical zones, crumbled factories, overgrown former mine sites, and abandoned highways. I've faced off against packs of feral dogs, organized scavenger gangs, and people so utterly broken they've forgotten their own names. I continue this work because I possess the necessary skills and tenacity, and having Barry by my side makes all the difference. I've been a scavenger long enough to internalize the harsh lessons of what kills you and what keeps you breathing. There is no official guide, no training videos or supervisor critiques, just the constant, immediate feedback of your own life or death decisions. Over time, I've forged my own code. Rule number 1: don't trust anybody. This sounds deceptively simple, but it is the hardest rule to adhere to. In this new world, people are the ultimate danger, far more unpredictable than the infected shambling around. The infected, at least, are honest about their murderous intent. People, however, will smile genuinely while they contemplate whether to steal your supplies, use you as a distraction, or simply eat you. You'll encounter folks who appear normal, clean clothes, calm demeanor, a tidy camp, and you'll think you found a flicker of humanity. Don't fall for it. A newly infected can look more human than the average survivor. They can still walk, talk, and even crack a joke right up until the moment they taste blood. After that, the transformation accelerates dramatically. The eyes cloud over, the nails darken, and the teeth begin to loosen. I learned this grim reality the hard way. Barry and I were north of Ridge Run, scouting what looked like a quiet, untouched cluster of houses. We hadn't eaten in 36 hours, and I was desperately searching for canned food or a water source. We found a small cottage where the curtains were still hanging and the front porch was swept clean. A man stepped out, looking deceptively healthy, with trimmed hair and neat clothes. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace and offered me something warm to drink. Barry immediately dropped low and began a deep, guttural growl, a warning I should have. The water was murky, but the aroma was a powerful memory of the world before. As I almost thanked him, he smiled, and one of his molars dropped with a soft plink into the cup. He looked down, confused, just before his hand twitched and his jaw unhinged wider than possible. His gums were black. I put a bullet in his head before he could even stand. The shattered cup hit the ground, and the steam from the coffee mixed with the immediate smell of decay. We searched the house and found a partially consumed body upstairs. I sealed the door and left it. That cemented rule number 1. Never trust anyone. A few days later, I came across another house. It looked like a party had been abruptly halted. Pink balloons, a half-eaten cake, paper hats neatly lined up, and a banner reading, "Happy 7th." The floor was sticky with something sweet and dark. The smell was the first thing that hit me. Sugar and meat. The stench, a sickening mix of sugar and human meat, was almost unbearable. Barry whined, clinging to my side. The infected swarm must have been drawn in by the sound of celebration, the laughter, and the singing. I could visualize the horror. Parents lighting candles, the kids laughing. The first sudden, panicked scream, the sound of furniture being overturned. In the kitchen, I saw small, child-sized footprints clearly imprinted in the icing, evidence of a futile attempt to run or hide. Once the parents turned, it was over fast. The newly turned always attack the nearest target first. It's an oddly unsettling experience to hear the tinny, broken music of a toy piano echoing through a house of the dead. I found one upstairs, sitting directly in front of a small pink chair. When Barry's paw nudged it, it played a sequence of 3 broken, repetitive notes. I immediately pulled the batteries out to silence the sound. I sat on the stairs for a long time, scratching Barry behind the ears, telling him, "This is why we don't stay long, boy. Places like this, they get into your head." He just gave me his steady, understanding stare. It's remarkable how much communication can pass between a man and his dog without a single word. That quiet, shared comprehension is what keeps me from losing my humanity completely. I did what I could. I buried those I could identify and burned the rest. Fire is impartial and unforgiving. When the grim task was finished, I collected what useful supplies I could find and left the candles burning on the table. The frosting was dripping down the sides of the cake like wax. The banner fluttered slightly in a draft. Happy 7th. 7 years old, old enough to believe in safety. I wondered how long they'd kept the decorations, hoping to reclaim a piece of the world that was gone. Barry nudged my hand, and I scratched behind his ear. "Yeah, let's get out of here," I told him. We walked until the house was completely obscured by a row of dead trees. People often claim there is safety in numbers, And while that may hold a partial truth, out here, the wrong company will kill you far quicker than any infected horde. Therefore, my policy remains: don't trust anyone at first. Take your time, analyze their movements, and understand their motivations. But if you do find someone genuinely trustworthy, hold on to them with everything you have. Rule number 2, bring a jar of flies. I know how ridiculous this sounds. I frequently catch people staring at the pickle jar I keep tied to my belt like I've lost my mind. I don't care about their judgment. That jar has saved my life more than once. The truly dangerous infected, the ones people sometimes call unmentionables or simply zombies, can pass for human during the early stages. The infection doesn't always manifest with dramatic groans or staggering feet. At first, it's just a person who looks exhausted, a bit pale, and might be your friend. The signs: a slight stiffness in the neck, subtle yellowing fingernails, chronic bad breath, can take months to appear, and by the time you spot them, it's often too late. That's where the flies become my most reliable asset. Flies do not lie. You take a small, clear container, like an old pickle jar, and cover the perforated lid with a fine mesh. Inside, you place a tiny piece of rotting meat, just enough to sustain the flies. They'll generally buzz around slowly and lazily. As long as there's nothing recently dead in the immediate vicinity, they remain calm. But the moment something rotten, something they can sense, which is completely imperceptible to us, comes close, the flies instantly go manic. They buzz loudly, bouncing frantically off the glass as if desperate to escape. That is your first non-negotiable warning. Something is fundamentally wrong. The real test is when I intentionally let them out. I only do this when someone is setting off my internal alarms, but I can't pinpoint any visible symptoms. Maybe they seem too calm or unnaturally clean. I unclip the jar and release the flies. They possess an unerring instinct for where to land. Flies are drawn to decay, not just the visible surface-level rot, but the deep, internal putrefaction, the infection spreading through the organs and blood. A person can still be breathing, still conversing, but the flies can already smell what is coming. If they swarm a person, landing on their skin repeatedly more than on anything else nearby, that's the absolute sign. That person is already dead. They simply haven't finished turning yet. I've been in survivor camps where they offered me food and a place by the fire. Everything seemed fine, yet the jar began to rattle violently. I'd open the lid and observe. If the flies went to the communal stew pot, fine. If they flew toward the latrine, acceptable. But if they circled and landed on an individual, I pack my gear and leave immediately. No questions, no explanations. I just go. I once partnered with a man named Ellis for a salvage operation in an old train yard. He seemed capable, a good shot, pulled his own weight, and was blessedly quiet. On the third day, the buzz from the jar became exceptionally loud. During lunch, I discreetly released the flies. Almost all of them gravitated directly toward Ellis, landing on his collar and sleeve. One even crawled slowly across his eye, and he didn't even blink. I stood up slowly, reaching for my pack, keeping my movements deliberate. When he asked what was wrong, I simply replied, "You've got a smell on you, Ellis, and it ain't something soap can fix." He tried to dismiss it, calling me paranoid. Perhaps I was, but I'd rather lose a temporary partner than be ripped apart in my sleep. We parted ways after a short, sharp argument. But before I left, I saw the rapidly darkening bruise of a bite mark on his forearm that he'd tried desperately to hide with his sleeve. People mistakenly believe the undead are all obvious, groaning monsters. They're wrong. Many of them walk among us, trying to imitate normalcy by talking, nodding, and pretending to eat. But inside, the decay is relentless. The flies know it. They are the ultimate, incorruptible warning system. So I keep the jar, I feed the flies, and I keep them alive. You can't always trust your eyes or your instincts, but you can always trust the flies. They never pretend. Rule number 3. The undead are not your loved ones. They may wear the identical face, mimic the same walk, and might even utter a few recognizable words if they've only I am not suggesting this is an easy rule. It is anything but. But in this reality, survival has nothing to do with what is easy. It is about what is absolutely necessary. If you genuinely cannot bring yourself to kill, I won't pass judgment. Not everyone is built for it. But if that is your moral boundary, you must avoid them entirely. Do not stand there clinging to a foolish hope that they are still in there. They are not. You have alternatives to direct confrontation. The flies, as discussed, are one. They offer a vital warning, giving you enough precious time to change your route or slip away unnoticed. A trained animal is another. Barry isn't just my friend. He's an essential piece of equipment. He's trained to freeze at the first sign of trouble, to sniff out the rot before I can see it. If he stiffens or drops his head, I stop all movement, simply standing still, allowing the threat to the infected. Even the fresh ones move differently than living people. They hesitate at simple doorways, turn their heads unnaturally slow, and never blink. If you choose not to fight, then you must become a master of observation and evasion. Learn to run intelligently. However, you don't have the luxury of being completely useless. If you refuse to be strong, then you must be clever. If you won't carry a weapon, carry critical tools. Bring warning devices. Set simple traps behind you to slow anyone following. Travel with a fighter, perhaps, but never rely on them as a crutch. Be ready to pull your weight in another crucial way. The most dangerous person out here is the one who refuses to kill and also fails to prepare. that person gets everyone around them injured or worse. I'm not ordering you to become a killer. I am telling you to know yourself. Know your limits, know your core morality, and stick to it. We are all striving to hold on to something. Hope, guilt, or the belief that the world might eventually heal. I don't condemn anyone for having hope. But if you plan to stick around for the good days, do everyone a favor and make yourself genuinely useful in the meantime. And for those who choose the path of the skilled fighter, I have one last, non-negotiable rule. Rule number 4, always double tap. This means you never, ever assume a single hit is enough. It doesn't matter if you put a round clean through the skull or split their head with a heavy axe. Do it again. The infected do not obey the physics of a corpse. People assume it's like the old movies. One shot, one fall, done. But I've personally seen bodies sit up and attack after lying completely still for a full hour. No warning, no sound, just a sudden terrifying snap to life. Eyes open, arms reaching. That is why I double tap every single time. One high-powered shot to the skull. The second, if I can get the angle, goes into the spine. If I'm using a blunt weapon, I aim for a head crush first, then obliterate the neck. I'll even stomp it in if necessary. The goal is simple. Turn the head into an unrecognizable pulp. Nothing neat or respectful. Just break it. Then, you check the heart. This is the crucial detail they never mentioned in the old world. Not in books, not on TV, and certainly not in the initial short-lived broadcasts. Everyone fixated exclusively on the brain. But the contagion embeds itself in both the brain and the heart. You can shoot one of them clean through the head, and they will certainly drop. But if the heart is still functional, even with a weak residual pump, the body may not cease moving. The muscles will spasm. The jaw will continue to snap. I've witnessed one of them keep crawling forward, even as its skull was leaking fluid onto the floor. The only way to guarantee a complete stop is to deliver a definitive blow to the chest. If you're using a blade, you stab deep and hard. If it's a blunt instrument, you must shatter the ribs. It takes significant force to penetrate the sternum and stop that residual muscle activity. This is why most experienced fighters carry a primary and a secondary weapon. I use my scoped bolt-action rifle for long-distance elimination. But for close quarters, my trusted tool is a short-handled sledgehammer. It's heavy, yet manageable, and perfectly designed for cracking bone. It's permanently attached to my hip. People have often questioned my methods, asking why I bother to exert the extra effort or waste the precious ammunition. I do it because I have seen the consequences of not doing so. I was once with a group of 5 who cleared out an old barn. One of the bodies looked shriveled and completely dead. No one bothered to double tap it. We set up camp right there. Hours later, the dead body moved. It attacked us without a sound, taking a massive chunk out of one girl's arm before I could stop it. We were forced to put her down the next morning. After that tragic incident, No one among us needed to speak a word. Everyone simply started checking their kills twice, every time. This grim lesson seamlessly leads to my next vital rule for survival in this broken world. You must learn how to run. Rule number 5, stay limber. This sounds absurd, like advice from an old high school gym coach forcing students to run in the brutal heat. But I assure you, it is deadly serious. Out here, maintaining your physical flexibility and readiness can be the sole barrier between walking back to your safe zone and being torn apart in a forgotten ditch. Most people mistakenly equate survival with brute strength, carrying massive weapons and striking with power. That certainly helps, but in the overwhelming majority of dangerous situations, the key is running. It's about escaping before the sheer numbers of the infected can surround you, before something unseen grabs your ankle, or before your escape route is sealed off. The infected never tire. You, the living, absolutely do. That is a fundamental, unavoidable truth. I find myself running far more often than I fight. Most fights aren't worth the risk. 1 or 2 infected? I might hold my ground. A pack? Absolutely not. You pivot, you run, and you never look back. But what happens when your muscles lock up? What if your back spasms or your foot twists because you skipped your crucial morning routine? Let me tell you a story about what happens next. It happened about a year ago. Barry and I were on a scavenging run at a decrepit hardware store on the east side of Ridge Run. The roof was half gone, and the place had been thoroughly picked over. But I was hoping to salvage something minor, like coils of wire or boxes of nails for trade. I woke up that morning, feeling stiff. I had slept awkwardly. My neck was sore, and my shoulder was tucked at a bad angle. Foolishly, I completely skipped my normal stretching routine. I just rolled out of the bedroll, gave Barry a strip of jerky, and set out. I thought, what could possibly go wrong today? We were inside the store for maybe 10 minutes when I noticed the back door swinging wide open. That is an unmistakable bad sign. Doors don't move unassisted. Barry immediately froze beside me, ears raised and nose twitching rapidly. Then I heard the sound, the slow, dragging footsteps that resonated ominously on the broken tile floor. I quickly counted the sources of the sound. Too many for a fair fight. I retreated. But as I turned, I saw that the front entrance was already blocked by a pack of 6 or 7 infected, all relatively fresh. There was zero time for confrontation. I yelled a command to Barry and bolted toward the side aisle, aiming for the cracked window we had used for entry. I should have been fast enough. I should have been completely fine, but I hadn't stretched. My hamstrings were tight, and my ankles were stiff. Halfway down the aisle, I slipped on the broken lid of an old paint can. My right knee twisted sharply, and I crashed hard onto the floor. My elbow hit a shelf, sending a heavy wrench clanging and echoing across the concrete. a noise that instantly redirected all 7 infected straight toward us. Barry circled back, baring his teeth and emitting a protective, low growl. I painfully forced myself up, trying desperately to suppress a limp, making my burning legs move. I reached the window just as the first infected reached the aisle. Barry leaped out first. I dropped through after him, landing shoulder first in the dirt outside. We didn't stop running until we were a half-mile away. Later, back at the shack, I was groaning, aggressively rubbing my throbbing knee. Barry sat near the stove, observing me with the deep, silent judgment of an animal that knew I had acted foolishly. He slowly tilted his head, practically daring me to complain. I looked at him and muttered, Yeah, I know. I should have stretched." He blinked once, confirming his silent condemnation. "You think you're better than me just because you do that little downward dog thing every morning?" I challenged him. He merely sneezed dismissively. I pointed at him. "Don't give me attitude. You weren't the one limping for 3 agonizing days." He yawned, then flopped down, acting completely unaffected. "So, go ahead and laugh, but I choose to look silly, stretching in the dirt, rather than become lunch because I pulled a calf muscle trying to jump a small fence. Survival is not about looking glorious. It's about doing what works, no matter how ridiculous it seems. Stay loose, stay alive. Simple as that. The core principle isn't just about outrunning a threat. Sometimes it's about having the physical capacity to climb to safety. And that particular capability is forever branded in my memory. This goes back to the very early days when Barry was still small, barely able to climb into my pack unaided. I was traveling with a small group then, but only one man truly mattered: Williams. We had been together since the start of the outbreak, meeting during a fuel run. Williams had a noticeable limp from a car accident years ago. His right leg never fully recovered, but he was tougher than most. He knew how to move silently and was an accurate shot. We were traversing a stretch of quiet forest and scattered farmland. It was peaceful, almost tranquil, until the horde descended. We never found out what attracted them. A sound, our scent, it's irrelevant now. We ran, with no time to formulate a plan or find a decent hiding spot. I spotted a huge tree, tall, solid, with a branch low enough to grab. I climbed immediately. I distinctly remember Barry yelping below. I scooped him up, shoved him into my pack, and scrambled upward as fast as sheer panic would allow. The bark tore painfully at my hands, but I didn't hesitate. Williams tried his absolute best, but his bad leg failed him on the first big leap. He slipped and fell back to the ground. I was halfway up the tree when I heard the first of the infected smash through the trees directly behind Williams. I remember the sounds much more vividly than the sight itself. The sickening crunch of breaking branches, followed by a scream that suddenly became wet and guttural. His gun fired repeatedly, a desperate defense. I didn't look down. I pressed my back hard against the rough trunk and held Barry tight against my chest. Then, his gun fell silent. Then, his breathing stopped. The next day, There wasn't a recognizable trace of him left. It's strange what memories cling to you. Most people remember dates and celebrations. I remember that sound. It echoes in my mind every time my knees ache or I take a clumsy fall. Every time I curse my increasing stiffness, I think of Williams and his inability to climb to safety. So I stretch. I run my drills. I maintain my fitness. Not because I believe I can outrun everything forever, but because I've seen, with devastating clarity, what happens when you're not fast enough. Now, speaking of common, reckless mistakes, there is one location where people invariably drop their guard. They perceive it as a private, silent, and inherently safe place. It is not. It is, in fact, one of the single most dangerous traps you can ever walk into if you aren't thinking critically. Pay close attention to this next rule, as it eventually catches everyone. Rule number 6. Beware of bathrooms. Beware of bathrooms. Sounds absolutely idiotic, I realize, but it is one of the most vital survival lessons I have ever learned. I don't care how desperate you are, or how pristine the room looks from the outside. Do not trust it. Bathrooms will end your life faster than being ambushed by a full horde in the open. The infected don't spend much time lingering in the open anymore. Maybe they did in the initial chaos, wandering the highways or slumped against storefronts in plain daylight, making them predictable, easy targets. Not now. Now they hide, especially the older, smarter ones. They've learned that exposure gets them shot, so they seek shelter in confined, closed-off spaces, forgotten backrooms, dark closets, abandoned shops, and the absolute worst of all, bathrooms. Bathrooms are their perfect trap. They are small, perpetually dark, and quiet. They have plenty of tight corners and stalls to cram into. If you make any noise at all, a creaking door, a simple footstep, a cough, they wait for it. And the moment you step too far inside, your exit is blocked, and they are already rushing you from behind. I never enter an enclosed space without a clear, defined escape plan. But bathrooms, I bypass them entirely. I haven't used one in years, and I'll tell you exactly why. Barry and I were traversing a burned-out town west of the ridge. No signs remained, just ash, rust, and half-collapsed structures. A gas station was still partially standing, its side door invitingly open. We decided to check the inside for supplies. I went in first, slow and methodical, while Barry stayed near the entrance. It was silent, eerily so, but I focused on the task. I was working with another guy at the time, a young, jumpy type who was over-eager to prove his worth. He suddenly announced he needed to relieve himself. I ordered him to do it outside, but he just laughed and said, "Come on, man, it's just a bathroom." He walked toward the back and pushed the door open. I will never forget the sound that followed. It was like a stack of chairs collapsing instantly, followed by one single piercing scream. Then, dead silence. I ran back and burst the door open, but it was already too late. I found his arm by the sink, torn off cleanly at the shoulder. The rest of him was gone. At least 10 infected were jammed into the far corner, silent as bones, piled up like forgotten trash bags. They looked like they'd been there for days, maybe weeks. No sound, no movement, until he stepped across the threshold. Then, they rushed him. He never even got his weapon out. After that incident, I swore off bathrooms forever. I don't care about societal decency. Let the dead keep their broken plumbing. I am not going to die because I craved 2 minutes of privacy. The rule of thumb here is simple. If a room is small enough to generate an echo, it is small enough to become a fatal trap. If you are forced to step into a room that small, you absolutely must know your available exits. You must have reliable backup, and you must have an armed partner waiting outside. But truly, the best option is to never go in at all. I have found them under broken sinks, wedged behind open doors, and crammed into stalls with the seats still down. Once, I encountered a corpse, so dried out and gray, squeezed behind an old mop closet, that I mistook it for a pile of old cloth until it suddenly moved. That one nearly got Barry, managing only to bite the strap of his pack instead of his leg. I immediately pulverized its head with a fire extinguisher. We abandoned that gas station without taking a single item. Some places simply aren't worth the risk. Bathrooms are pure traps. Nothing more, nothing less. I've heard similar stories from countless other survivors. Someone needs a quiet place to clean up, to sit down, or just to catch their breath for a second. They assume a closed bathroom means guaranteed safety. Then the door behind them suddenly opens, or the adjacent stall is not, in fact, empty, or the thing hidden under the sink is not entirely dead. You do not walk away from that kind of mistake. So don't be a fool. Don't be shy. Go outside, just like the rest of us. Find a car to hide behind, a cluster of trees, whatever you need. Just don't go inside. If you want to live to see another day, let the dead keep their bathrooms. And those are the rules. Nothing intricate. Nothing carved in eternal stone. Just the brutal, hard-won lessons I've picked up over years of survival. If they offer you any benefit, then that is good. If they manage to keep you breathing for even one more day, that is even better. We're heading east next, looking for more potential jobs, knowing there will be more infected. Who can say what waits for us? But whatever lies ahead, Barry and I know the rules. And now, so do you. Good luck.